The rain hammered against the tall windows of the Beaumont Tower penthouse like bullets of ice, each drop a reminder of how cold the world had become since Catherine's death. Adrian Beaumont stood motionless, staring at the blurred skyline of Manhattan, his reflection barely visible in the glass, a ghost of the man he used to be. 2 years had passed since the accident. 2 years since the headlines screamed about tragedy and loss. 2 years since his son Oliver stopped smiling. "Mr. Beaumont, the car is ready." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling him back to the present. Adrian didn't respond immediately. His eyes drifted to the framed photograph on his desk. Catherine, radiant in her wedding dress, laughing at something he'd said. She had loved him before the fortune, before the empire, before the world knew his name. That kind of love, he'd learned the hard way, was irreplaceable, and yet Oliver needed a mother. The boy was 7 now, growing up surrounded by nannies who smiled too much, tutors who cared too little, and a father who worked 18-hour days to avoid the emptiness at home. Adrian had tried dating again, carefully orchestrated introductions to society women, daughters of business partners, models who appeared on magazine covers. Each one arrived with perfect hair, perfect teeth, and perfectly calculated interest in his bank account. None of them looked at Oliver the way Catherine had. "Sir?" The intercom buzzed again. "Tell Marcus I'll be down in 5 minutes," Adrian replied, his voice flat. He grabbed his briefcase and headed toward the private elevator, but paused at Oliver's bedroom door. It was cracked open just enough for him to see inside. The boy sat cross-legged on an enormous bed, surrounded by toys he never played with, staring at an iPad screen with hollow eyes. "Hey, buddy," Adrian said softly, pushing the door open. "I have to go to a meeting. Mrs. Chen will be here with you." Oliver didn't look up. "Okay." The single word cut deeper than any business loss ever could. Adrian stepped closer, kneeling beside the bed. "How about this weekend we go to the lake house? Just you and me. We can take the boat out, maybe catch some fish." "You always cancel," Oliver said quietly, still not meeting his father's eyes. The truth stung because it was accurate. Adrian opened his mouth to promise this time would be different, but the words died in his throat. He'd made that promise before. Instead, he simply touched his son's shoulder. "I love you, Oliver." "I know." The boy's voice was small, distant. If you've been enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Adrian rode the elevator down in silence, his mind churning. The meeting ahead was with another potential acquisition, a tech startup worth millions. Numbers, projections, profit margins, things he understood, things he could control, unlike the look in his son's eyes. Marcus, his driver for the past decade, opened the car door without a word. The man had learned long ago that Mr. Beaumont preferred silence during drives. As the Mercedes glided through Manhattan's rain-soaked streets, Adrian stared out the window, watching people hurry past with umbrellas, briefcases, coffee cups. Ordinary lives he'd left behind so long ago he could barely remember what normal felt like. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian Ashford, daughter of a real estate mogul he'd partnered with last year. They'd had dinner twice. She was beautiful, educated, said all the right things. But when she'd met Oliver, she'd patted his head like he was a golden retriever and immediately started talking about boarding schools in Switzerland. "Adrian, darling, are we still on for the charity gala Friday? I bought the most stunning Valentino, can't wait for you to see it. XOXO. He deleted the message without responding. The car pulled up to the building where the meeting was scheduled, but Adrian found himself saying, "Marcus, take me to the Riverside property instead." "Sir?" Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, surprised. "You have the tech acquisition meeting in 20 minutes. Cancel it. Tell them something came up." The Riverside property was a mansion Adrian had purchased 3 years ago as an investment, a sprawling estate in Westchester County that he'd planned to flip but never got around to selling. He kept a skeleton staff there, a groundskeeper, a housekeeper, a cook, people who maintained the property for the occasional corporate retreat, or when he needed to escape the city. He hadn't been there in months. As the car wound through the tree-lined roads leading to the estate, Adrian felt something shift inside him. An idea was forming, reckless and possibly insane, but it was the first thing in 2 years that felt remotely like hope. What if he could find someone who would love Oliver, truly love him, without knowing about the billions, the empire, the Beaumont name? What if he stripped away everything that made him Adrian Beaumont, billionaire, and became just a man? The mansion came into view, elegant and understated compared to his Manhattan penthouse. The rain had softened to a drizzle and the gardens looked overgrown, almost wild. Perfect. Marcus stopped the car at the front entrance. "Will you be needing me to wait, sir?" "No. I'll call when I'm ready to head back." Adrian stepped out into the cool air, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, he felt something close to clarity. He would do it. He would create a test, not for himself, but for the world. He would come here as someone ordinary, someone unremarkable, and see who treated Oliver with genuine care when there was nothing to gain from it. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would find what Catherine had given him all those years ago: love without conditions. As he walked toward the entrance, Adrian Beaumont made a decision that would change everything. He would disappear, and in his place a different man would emerge, one who had nothing to offer but a child who desperately needed someone to care. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows of the Riverside estate, casting golden streaks across the marble countertops. Adrian stood in the doorway, dressed in clothes he'd borrowed from Marcus: simple jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and work boots that had seen better days. He barely recognized himself in the hallway mirror. Gone was the $15,000 suit. Gone were the Italian leather shoes and the Patek Philippe watch. He'd even mussed his hair differently, letting it fall more naturally instead of the carefully styled look his barber maintained. He looked ordinary, exactly what he needed. "Mr. Beaumont?" Helen Torres, the head housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen, her eyes widening slightly at his appearance. She was a woman in her late 50s, efficient and discreet, exactly why he'd kept her on staff, even when the property sat mostly empty. "Helen, I need your help with something unusual," Adrian said, keeping his voice low. "And I need your absolute discretion." She nodded slowly, her professional demeanor never wavering. "Of course, sir. I'm going to be staying here for a while, but no one, and I mean no one, can know who I really am. As far as the staff is concerned, I'm Daniel Morrison. I'm the new property manager here to oversee some renovations and assess the staff's performance." Helen's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she didn't question him. 20 years of working for wealthy families had taught her that the rich had their eccentricities and her job was to accommodate, not interrogate. "I understand, mister." She caught herself. "I understand, Daniel. I'll be bringing my son here next week. I want to see how the staff interacts with him naturally, without the complications that come with my real identity." Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm looking for someone genuine, someone who would care for Oliver because of who he is, not what his last name represents." Understanding dawned in Helen's eyes. Her expression softened. "You're looking for a mother for the boy?" "I'm looking for someone real," Adrian corrected, though her assessment wasn't far off. "Someone who would show kindness to a child even when there's nothing in it for them." Helen considered this for a moment. "The staff here is small. There's myself, Thomas the groundskeeper, Maria the cook, and we just hired a new housemaid last month. Her name is Grace Williams. She came highly recommended, though." Helen hesitated. "Though what?" "She's overqualified for the position, frankly. She has a degree in early childhood education, worked at a prestigious private school in Connecticut, but she needed the job quickly, didn't ask many questions about salary or duties. She just needed work." Adrian's interest piqued. "Why would someone with those credentials take a housemaid position?" "I didn't ask, sir." "Daniel," Helen corrected herself. "But if I had to guess, sometimes people need a fresh start. Sometimes they're running from something, or towards something. She's a hard worker, keeps to herself mostly, and she's—" Helen paused, seeming to weigh her words. "She's kind, genuinely kind. I've seen her feeding the birds in the garden on her breaks, talking to them like they're old friends. I'd like to meet her. She's in the East Wing right now, cleaning the guest suites. I'll call her down." "No," Adrian said quickly. "I'll go to her. I want to observe her naturally, if that makes sense." Helen nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "It makes perfect sense." Adrian found Grace Williams in the largest guest suite, humming softly to herself as she changed the linens on a bed that hadn't been slept in for months. She didn't hear him approach. His work boots were surprisingly quiet on the plush carpet. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. She was African American, probably in her late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore the standard housemaid uniform, simple black dress, white apron, but there was something about the way she moved that suggested grace beyond her name. Her movements were efficient but not rushed, careful but not precious. She treated the empty room with the same attention she might give to one occupied by royalty. What struck Adrian most, though, was her face. Even in profile, even doing mundane work, She had an openness to her expression, a softness that reminded him achingly of Catherine. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Grace startled, spinning around with one hand pressed to her chest. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in." Her voice was warm with a slight southern accent. "Georgia, maybe, or South Carolina. You must be the new property manager Helen mentioned. I'm Grace." She extended her hand without hesitation, meeting his eyes directly. No deference, no calculation, just a straightforward greeting between equals. Adrian shook her hand. "Daniel Morrison, nice to meet you." "Likewise." She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Helen said you'd be assessing how things run around here. I hope I'm not already in trouble for something." "Not at all. I'm just getting a feel for the place." He glanced around the immaculate room. "You do good work." "Thank you. I figure even if no one's staying in a room, it deserves to be cared for properly. You never know when someone might need it." She resumed her work, smoothing out the duvet with practiced hands. "Are you from around here?" "Manhattan originally." "You?" "Charleston. Moved up north about 2 months ago." There was something in her tone. Not sadness exactly, but a careful neutrality that suggested the move hadn't been entirely voluntary. "Big change," Adrian observed. "Sometimes change is good." Grace tucked in the final corner of the duvet, then moved to adjust the curtains, letting in more light. "Sometimes we need distance from things to see them clearly." Adrian found himself genuinely curious. "What made you choose housekeeping?" "Helen mentioned you have a background in education." Grace's hand stilled on the curtains. For a moment, Adrian thought he'd overstepped pride too much. But then she turned to face him, and her expression was open, if a bit guarded. "Teaching was my dream," she said simply. "I loved it, but sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. I needed a change of scenery, and this job offered stability, room and board, and a chance to start over. No shame in honest work." "None at all," Adrian agreed. "But don't you miss it? Working with children?" Something flickered across Grace's face. Longing, perhaps, or regret. "Every day. But you can't always have what you want, can you? You work with what you've got, and you make the best of it." Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it. A message from his executive assistant about the canceled meeting causing complications with the tech startup. He silenced it without responding. "Popular guy," Grace observed with a slight smile. "Just work. Nothing that can't wait." He pocketed the phone. "Can I ask you something, Grace?" "Sure. If you could do anything without worrying about money or circumstances or any of the practical stuff, what would you do?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd open a learning center for kids who fall through the cracks. Kids from difficult homes, kids who need extra support, kids who just need someone to believe in them. I'd make it a place where every child felt seen, heard, and valued, where they could be themselves without judgment." The passion in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a rehearsed answer or a polite deflection. This was something she'd thought about deeply, dreamed about genuinely. "That's a beautiful vision," Adrian said quietly. "It's just a dream, though. Dreams don't pay the bills." She shrugged, but there was no bitterness in the gesture, just acceptance. "Right now, I'm grateful to have this job, this roof over my head, and the chance to start fresh. That's enough." Adrian studied her for a long moment. There was something remarkable about her contentment, her ability to find peace in circumstances that were clearly beneath her capabilities. No resentment, no entitlement, just genuine gratitude for what she had. "Well, I should let you get back to work," he said, moving toward the door. "Daniel?" Grace called after him. He turned back. "Welcome to Riverside. I think you'll like it here. It's a good place. Peaceful." "I think I will too," Adrian replied, and meant it. That evening, Adrian sat in the estate's library, a room he'd always loved for its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the massive fireplace that dominated one wall. He'd lit a fire, more for atmosphere than warmth, and was nursing a glass of scotch when Helen knocked on the open door. "Your dinner is ready in the dining room," sighed Daniel. "Thank you, Helen. Actually, I was hoping to ask you something. Where do the staff eat?" "We have a small dining area off the kitchen." "Why do you ask?" "Would it be unusual for me to join you all? I want to get to know everyone, see how the household operates." Helen looked uncertain. "It wouldn't be inappropriate exactly, but it might make people uncomfortable. The staff aren't used to dining with management. Let's make it optional then. Anyone who wants to join me is welcome. I don't like eating alone." 20 minutes later, Adrian found himself at a modest table in the staff dining area with Helen, Maria the cook, Thomas the groundskeeper, and after some gentle encouragement from Helen, Grace. The conversation started awkwardly, with everyone clearly unsure of protocol, but Maria's warmth and Thomas's dry humor soon broke the ice. They talked about the property, about the upcoming autumn and the work it would require on the grounds, about Maria's grandchildren and her famous empanadas. Adrian mostly listened, observing the dynamics. Thomas was gruff but kind. Maria was maternal and generous. Helen was the steady backbone that kept everything running smoothly. And Grace? Grace was the one who asked questions. She wanted to know about Thomas's years as a groundskeeper, about the history of the estate, about Maria's family. She listened with genuine interest, laughed at jokes, and managed to make everyone feel heard. It was a gift, Adrian realized. The ability to make others feel valued, seen, important. "So, Daniel," Grace said, turning her attention to him, "what brings you to property management? You don't strike me as someone who's been doing this for long." Adrian nearly choked on his water. She was perceptive. "Career change," he said carefully. "I used to work in corporate acquisitions, but I got tired of the rat race, wanted something more hands-on, more real." "I can understand that," Grace said. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is step away from what you thought you wanted and find out what you actually need." Their eyes met across the table, and Adrian felt something shift. A connection, tentative but undeniable. "Exactly," he said softly. The conversation moved on, but Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Grace Williams saw more than he'd intended to reveal. Not his identity, he was confident in his disguise, but something deeper, something true. Later, as he prepared for bed in one of the guest rooms, Adrian made a decision. Next week, he would bring Oliver here. He would introduce his son as just a boy who needed looking after while his boss was busy with work, and he would watch carefully to see who treated Oliver with genuine care. Something told him he already knew what he would find. The week passed in a strange blur of dual realities. During the day, Adrian played his role as Daniel Morrison, the new property manager, reviewing maintenance schedules with Thomas, discussing menu options with Maria, helping Helen organize supply inventories. At night, he returned to Manhattan, slipping back into his real life just long enough to handle the most critical business matters and prepare Oliver for what came next. "We're going to stay at a house in the country for a while," Adrian told his son on Thursday evening, kneeling beside him in the bedroom. "Just you and me. No tutors, no schedules. We'll have space to breathe." Oliver looked up from his book, skeptical. "What about your meetings?" "I'm taking time off." The words felt foreign in Adrian's mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken more than a day away from the office. "I want to spend time with you, buddy. Real time." "Okay," Oliver said, but his tone suggested he'd believe it when he saw it. Friday morning, they made the drive to Riverside together. Oliver sat in the back seat, watching the city give way to suburbs, then suburbs to countryside. He didn't ask questions, didn't seem particularly excited or curious. He just existed. The hollow quality that had settled over him since Catherine's death remained, and it broke Adrian's heart every time he looked at his son. "The people at this house don't know who we really are," Adrian explained as they turned onto the long driveway leading to the estate. "I told them I'm the property manager and you're my son. I want you to just be yourself, okay? No pressure, no expectations." "Why are we pretending?" Oliver asked, the first real curiosity he'd shown all morning. Adrian chose his words carefully. "Because sometimes people act differently when they know you have money. I want to see who people really are when there's nothing to gain from being nice to us." Oliver considered this with the solemn seriousness of a child who'd grown up too fast. "Like those ladies you went to dinner with, the ones who only talked to you and ignored me." The observation stung because it was accurate. "Exactly like that. I didn't like them." "I know, buddy, I didn't either." The mansion came into view, and despite himself, Oliver's eyes widened slightly. "This is nice." "It is, isn't it?" Adrian pulled the car to a stop near the main entrance. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." Helen was waiting at the door, her professional smile firmly in place, but Adrian saw the way her eyes softened when she looked at Oliver. Genuine warmth, not the calculated charm he'd seen from so many others. "You must be Oliver," she said, extending her hand to the boy as if he were an adult. "I'm Mrs. Torres, but you can call me Helen. Welcome to Riverside." Oliver shook her hand carefully. "Thank you, ma'am." "Such good manners," Helen said approvingly. "Are you hungry?" Maria made fresh chocolate chip cookies this morning. For the first time in weeks, Adrian saw a flicker of interest in his son's eyes. "Chocolate chip?" "The best you'll ever taste," Helen promised. "Come on, I'll take you to the kitchen." As they walked through the foyer, Adrian noticed Grace descending the main staircase carrying fresh linens. She stopped when she saw them, and something crossed her face. Surprise, followed quickly by something else. Concern, maybe, or recognition of something she understood all too well. "Grace," Helen called up to her. "This is Daniel's son, Oliver. He'll be staying with us for a while." Grace descended the rest of the stairs, and Adrian watched her carefully. This was the moment, the first test. How would she react to a child she had no obligation to care about, no reason to impress? She set down the linens on a side table and approached Oliver with a gentle smile. Not the overly enthusiastic, false brightness adults often used with children, but something genuine and warm. "Hi, Oliver," she said, crouching down to his eye level. "I'm Grace. It's really nice to meet you." Oliver, usually shy with strangers, studied her for a moment. "Hi. Helen's right about Maria's cookies," Grace continued. "But I have to warn you, they're addictive. I ate 4 yesterday and had to go for a long walk to work them off." The corner of Oliver's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Your dad mentioned you might be staying for a while. There's a really cool treehouse in the back garden that Thomas built. Maybe later, if you want, I could show it to you." "A treehouse?" Oliver's voice held the first genuine excitement Adrian had heard in months. "A real one with a rope ladder and everything. Thomas even put a telescope up there for looking at stars. Can we go now?" Oliver looked up at Adrian, his eyes actually bright for once. Adrian felt his throat tighten. "After cookies. Let Grace finish her work first." "Oh, I'm just about done," Grace said easily. "I can take a break if that's okay with you, Daniel." The way she looked at him, checking for permission but also clearly ready to adjust her schedule for a child's happiness, told Adrian everything he needed to know about her priorities. "That's more than okay," he said quietly. "Thank you." Adrian watched from the library window as Grace led Oliver across the back lawn, toward the massive oak tree that held the treehouse. She wasn't rushing him, wasn't filling the silence with nervous chatter. She just walked beside him, occasionally pointing out something interesting, a bird, a flower, the way the afternoon light filtered through the leaves. Oliver was talking. Actually, talking. Adrian couldn't hear the words from this distance, but he could see his son's mouth moving, could see the way Grace leaned in to listen, nodded, responded. They looked natural together. "She's good with him," Helen said from the doorway, making Adrian jump slightly. He hadn't heard her approach. "Yes," Adrian agreed. "She is." "Grace lost someone," Helen said quietly. "I don't know the details. She doesn't talk about it, but I recognize that look. The way she watches children with a kind of careful tenderness, like she's afraid of getting too close but can't help herself. She's carrying something heavy." Adrian turned to face Helen. "Do you know what happened?" "No, and I won't ask. Everyone deserves their privacy, their fresh start." Helen paused, then added, "But I do know that sometimes the people who've been broken are the ones who know best how to help others heal. They recognize the cracks because they've had to repair their own." Through the window, Adrian saw Oliver climbing the rope ladder while Grace stood below, hands ready to catch him if he slipped, but not hovering, not smothering, letting him try, letting him succeed on his own. "She's exactly what I was hoping to find," Adrian murmured. "Be careful," Helen warned gently. "She's an employee. There are lines, boundaries, and more importantly, there's Oliver to think about. If he gets attached and then—" "I know." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to hurt either of them. That's the last thing I want." "Then what do you want, Mr. Beaumont?" The use of his real name startled him. Helen smiled slightly at his expression. "I've worked for wealthy families for 25 years. I know when someone's playing a role. I didn't say anything because I figured you had your reasons. But if this is going to affect my staff, I need to know what your intentions are." Adrian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I want to find someone who would love Oliver for who he is, not what he represents. Someone genuine. Someone who would care for him the way Catherine did, because he deserves it, not because there's something to gain. And Grace? I don't know yet. I'm watching, learning. But so far," he gestured toward the window, where Oliver had reached the top of the treehouse and was waving excitedly, while Grace clapped and cheered below. "So far, she's the first person since Catherine who's looked at my son like he matters." Helen nodded slowly. "Just remember, she's had her own pain. Whatever you're doing here, whatever test this is, make sure you're not using her vulnerability against her. Grace Williams is a good person. She deserves honesty." "I know," Adrian said, though guilt twisted in his stomach. "When the time is right, I'll tell her everything. Make sure you do, because that woman down there, She's not someone you want to lose. That evening, dinner was a revelation. Maria had prepared a simple but delicious meal: roasted chicken, vegetables from the estate's garden, fresh bread. The staff had set the formal dining room for Adrian and Oliver, but when Grace appeared to check if they needed anything, Oliver immediately asked if she could eat with them. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think that's appropriate," Grace said gently. "This is your time with your dad. Please?" Oliver's voice was small but earnest. "It's more fun when there are more people." Grace looked at Adrian questioningly. He nodded. "Please join us. Oliver's right. It's nicer with company." "Let me get my plate," Grace said, and disappeared into the kitchen. She returned moments later, and they settled into an easy conversation. Or rather, Oliver talked, really talked, for the first time in recent memory. He told Grace about his school, about the things he liked to read, about missing his mother but not wanting to make his dad sad by talking about her. "It's okay to miss people," Grace said gently. "Missing someone means they mattered. That's not something to hide or be ashamed of, and I bet your dad would want to hear about your mom. Right, Daniel?" Adrian felt emotion clog his throat. "Absolutely right. Oliver, you can always talk to me about Mom. Always. She used to read to me every night," Oliver said quietly, "even when she was tired. She did different voices for all the characters." "She sounds wonderful," Grace said. She was. Oliver pushed his vegetables around his plate. "Nobody else does the voices right. I bet I can't do them as well as your mom did," Grace offered carefully. "But I used to read to kids at the school where I worked. I'm pretty good at dragon voices and princess voices. If you ever want someone to read with you, I'd be happy to try." Oliver looked up, something like hope flickering across his face. "Really? Really? But only if you want to. No pressure. Maybe tonight?" Oliver glanced at Adrian. "If Dad's not too busy?" Adrian would have canceled a meeting with the president for the look on his son's face. "I'm not busy at all. In fact, I was hoping we could all hang out after dinner. Maybe watch a movie or play a game." "Can Grace stay?" Oliver asked. "If she wants to," Adrian said, looking at her. Grace smiled, and it lit up the entire room. "I'd love to." 2 hours later, Adrian sat in the estate's media room watching his son sprawled on the floor with Grace, the two of them building an elaborate Lego castle, while an animated movie played mostly ignored on the screen. Oliver was laughing, actually laughing, at something Grace had said about the Lego knight's crooked helmet. "He needs a name," Grace was saying. "Every knight needs a proper name." "Sir Wobbles," Oliver declared, "because his helmet makes him wobble." "Sir Wobbles of Riverside," Grace agreed solemnly. "Protector of the realm and wearer of questionable headgear." Oliver dissolved into giggles, and Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. This was what had been missing. Not just laughter, but lightness, joy, the simple pleasure of being a child without the weight of grief and loneliness crushing everything. Grace caught his eye and smiled, and in that moment, Adrian knew with absolute certainty that Helen was right. This woman, this kind, gentle, genuine woman who worked as a housemaid despite being overqualified, who treated his son like he was precious, who asked for nothing and gave everything. She was someone he couldn't afford to lose. The question was, how did he tell her the truth without breaking whatever fragile trust they were building? "Dad, come help us," Oliver called. "We need to build the dragon's lair." Adrian slid down to the floor beside them, and Grace handed him a pile of Lego pieces with a grin. "Hope you're better at architecture than I am. My dragons keep ending up with lopsided caves." "I'll do my best," Adrian said, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with Legos. As they built together, three people from completely different worlds, brought together by circumstance and need, and something that felt dangerously close to hope, Adrian made a silent promise. He would protect this, whatever it took, however long it required. He would find a way to build something real with Grace and Oliver, even if it meant tearing down every wall he'd spent 2 years constructing around his heart. Later that night, after Oliver had fallen asleep in one of the guest bedrooms with Grace's borrowed copy of The Chronicles of Narnia on his chest, Adrian walked her to the staff quarters. "Thank you," he said quietly as they paused outside her door. "For today, for him, you didn't have to do any of that." "I wanted to," Grace said simply. "He's a special kid, Daniel. You can see he's carrying a lot, but there's so much light in him still. He just needs people to help him remember it's okay to let it shine. You seem to understand that pretty well." Grace's smile turned bittersweet. "I've worked with a lot of kids who are hurting. Sometimes the ones who've lost the most have the biggest hearts. They just need someone to see it." to value it, to protect it. Is that what happened to you? Adrian asked gently. Did someone fail to protect your heart? For a long moment, Grace didn't answer. Then she said, I had a daughter, Lily. She died 3 years ago. Leukemia. She was 6. Adrian's chest constricted. Grace, I'm so sorry. After she passed, I couldn't keep teaching. Every child I saw was her, or could have been her, or reminded me of what I'd lost. I tried, but she shook her head. I needed to step away, to grieve, to figure out who I was without being her mother. That's why I'm here. Fresh start, new purpose, time to heal. And yet you spent the whole day with Oliver. I know. Grace laughed softly, wiping at her eyes. Probably not the smartest move for someone trying to protect their heart. But when I saw him, that sadness he tries to hide, that loneliness, I couldn't walk away. Some kids just, they get under your skin, you know? I do know, Adrian said. And for what it's worth, I think your daughter would be proud of you. For choosing kindness, even when it hurts. For giving another child what you can't give her anymore. Grace looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you for saying that. They stood in the quiet hallway, the weight of shared loss and unexpected connection hanging between them. Adrian wanted to tell her everything, who he really was, what he was doing, how much this day had meant. But the words stuck in his throat. Not yet. Not when things were so fragile, so new. Good night, Grace, he said instead. Good night, Daniel. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. He's lucky to have you, you know. Oliver. Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from or toward. He's lucky. If only she knew how wrong she was. Adrian Beaumont, billionaire and master of his domain, walked back to his own room feeling like the world's biggest fraud. But when he checked on Oliver one last time and saw his son sleeping peacefully with a small smile on his face, the first real smile in 2 years, he knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever it cost him in the end, this was worth it. The next 2 weeks at Riverside unfolded like a dream Adrian hadn't dared to imagine. Each morning he woke to the sound of birds instead of traffic, to sunlight filtering through curtains instead of the sterile glow of his penthouse. And each day, he watched his son transform. Oliver was smiling now, really smiling. He explored the grounds with Thomas, learning about the different plants and trees. He helped Maria in the kitchen, standing on a stool to stir cookie batter and shape empanadas. He even started asking Helen to teach him how things worked. The old grandfather clock in the hall, the intricate woodwork throughout the mansion, the history of the estate itself. But it was with Grace that he truly came alive. She read to him every evening, doing voices that made him laugh until his sides hurt. She taught him card games and helped him build elaborate Lego structures that took over an entire corner of the library. She walked with him through the gardens, pointing out constellations at night and teaching him the names of birds during the day. And she never once asked him for anything, never hinted at wanting rewards or recognition. She simply gave, freely and fully, the way a mother would. Adrian watched it all with a mixture of joy and growing guilt. The deception was eating at him. Every time Grace smiled at him, every time she treated him like an equal, like Daniel Morrison, ordinary property manager, the weight of his lies grew heavier. He'd started having phone conferences late at night, handling critical Beaumont Industries business from behind the closed door of his bedroom, speaking in hushed tones to his executive team. The tech acquisition he'd postponed had fallen through. A major investor was getting nervous about his absence. His board was starting to ask questions. You can't hide forever, Adrian. His CFO had warned him on a call 2 nights ago. People are noticing. The press is starting to speculate about your health, your mental state. You need to come back. But coming back meant leaving this fragile bubble he'd created. It meant tearing Oliver away from the first real happiness he'd known since Catherine's death. It meant revealing the truth to Grace, and potentially losing her forever. Just a little longer, Adrian had insisted. I need more time. Time for what? He wasn't entirely sure. Time to figure out how to tell Grace the truth? Time to make Oliver's happiness permanent? Time to untangle the mess he'd created? Or time to pretend, just a little longer, that he could be Daniel Morrison, a simple man with a simple job and a chance at something real? It was a Thursday afternoon when everything started to shift. Adrian was in the estate office reviewing maintenance reports Thomas had left for him when he heard raised voices from the front of the house. He hurried toward the sound and found Grace standing in the foyer, facing a well-dressed woman he'd never seen before. The stranger was immaculate. Designer suit, perfect hair, the kind of polished appearance that screamed money and power. She looked completely out of place in the relaxed atmosphere of Riverside. I'm telling you, I don't know who you're looking for, Grace was saying, her voice firm but polite. There's no one here by that name. Don't lie to me, the woman snapped. I know Adrian Beaumont owns this property. I know he's been here. His assistant let it slip, and I won't be dismissed like some... She stopped abruptly when she saw Adrian approaching. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Daniel, what are you doing here? I thought you worked for the Beaumont Corporation in acquisitions. Adrian's blood ran cold. The woman was Vivian Ashford, the real estate mogul's daughter he'd had dinner with twice in Manhattan, the one whose text messages he'd been ignoring for weeks. Vivian, he said carefully, his mind racing. This is unexpected, I'll say. Her eyes swept over his casual clothes, the work boots, the complete absence of his usual polish. What's going on? Why are you dressed like... She paused, understanding dawning across her face. Oh my God, are you undercover or something? Is this some kind of corporate espionage thing? Grace looked between them, confusion clear on her face. You two know each other? We've met, Adrian said tightly. Vivian, this isn't a good time. Can we talk outside? Not until you explain what's happening. Vivian's voice rose, and Adrian saw Oliver appear at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. Does Adrian Beaumont know you're here? Does he know you're pretending to be... Wait. Her eyes went to Oliver, then back to Adrian. That's his son. I'd recognize him from the photos. What is Adrian's son doing here with you? The pieces were falling together for her, but in completely the wrong configuration. Adrian could see Grace's confusion deepening, could see Oliver's worried expression as he descended the stairs. Dad? Oliver's voice was small. What's happening? The word hung in the air like a bomb. Vivian's mouth fell open. Dad? You're... She looked at Adrian again, really looked this time, and he saw the moment recognition clicked into place. Oh my God. Adrian? Adrian Beaumont? Grace gasped audibly. Adrian turned to her, seeing shock and betrayal wash across her face in equal measure. Grace, I can explain. You're Adrian Beaumont? Her voice was barely a whisper. The billionaire? You've been lying to me this entire time? I wasn't... It's not what you think. Not what I think? Grace's voice rose, hurt and anger mixing into something that made Adrian's chest ache. You pretended to be someone else. You let me believe you were just a regular person, that we were... She cut herself off, shaking her head. What was this? Some kind of game? Testing the help to see who's worthy of your attention? No, Adrian said desperately. It was never like that. I was trying to find someone genuine, someone who would care about Oliver without knowing you're rich? Grace finished bitterly. So this was a test. I was being tested. She looked at Oliver, and Adrian saw tears well in her eyes. And you used your son to do it. Grace, please. Is Grace even going to get paid for being a nanny? Vivian interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. Or was this all volunteer work? Because Adrian, darling, this is low even for you. Playing dress-up with the staff? Shut up, Vivian, Adrian snapped. You don't understand anything about this. I understand perfectly. You've been slumming it, probably looking for some Cinderella fantasy while the real world keeps spinning. Meanwhile, your company is hemorrhaging value, your board is in crisis mode, and you're here playing house with... Get out, Adrian ordered. Now. Gladly. This is pathetic. Vivian headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Adrian, the press is going to love this. Billionaire in hiding playing games with staff. It'll be front page by tomorrow. She slammed the door behind her, leaving a ringing silence in her wake. Adrian turned to Grace, who was backing away from him slowly, her hand pressed to her mouth. Grace, please listen to me. Yes, I lied about who I was, but everything else, everything between us, everything with Oliver, that was real. Real? Grace laughed, but it sounded broken. How can anything be real when it's built on lies? You watched me open up to you. You let me tell you about Lily, about my pain, about why I'm here. And the whole time you were, what? Evaluating me? Seeing if the poor housemaid was good enough for your son? It wasn't like that, Adrian insisted. I was trying to protect him. After Catherine died, every woman I met only cared about my money, my name. They looked at Oliver like he was an inconvenience or an opportunity. I needed to find someone real, someone who would love him for who he is. And you thought the best way to do that was to lie? Grace's voice cracked. To manipulate everyone around you? To make me care about a child and then... She stopped, visibly trying to compose herself. I need to leave. Grace, please don't... I quit, Mr. Beaumont. The formal address felt like a slap. I'll pack my things and be gone by tonight. Grace, Oliver's voice rang out. He'd been silent through the entire exchange, but now he ran down the remaining stairs, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't go. I'm sorry Dad lied, I'm sorry. But please don't leave me too." The raw desperation in his son's voice shattered Adrian's heart. Grace stopped, her own tears falling freely now. "Oliver, sweetie. Everyone leaves." Oliver sobbed. "Mom left and now you're leaving, and I know it's because of me. Because I'm not good enough, because—" "No!" Grace dropped to her knees, pulling Oliver into a fierce hug. "Don't you ever think that. You are wonderful and special, and this has nothing to do with you, you hear me? Nothing. Then why are you leaving?" Grace looked up at Adrian over Oliver's head, and the pain in her eyes nearly destroyed him. "Because sometimes adults make choices that hurt people," she said gently, still holding Oliver close. "And when that happens, we have to decide what's right, even when it's hard." "But you love me," Oliver said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I know you do. You said people who love each other are supposed to stay." "I do love you," Grace whispered. "So much, but—" "Then please stay," Oliver begged. "Please. I'll be better. I'll be good, You're already perfect," Grace said, and Adrian heard the breaking in her voice. She looked up at him again, and he saw the war raging behind her eyes, anger at his deception battling with love for his son. Adrian knelt beside them. "Grace, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong. But Oliver does deserve someone who loves him. And you do. I've seen it every single day. Please don't punish him for my mistakes." "That's not fair," Grace said, but her conviction was wavering. "Nothing about this is fair," Adrian agreed. "But it's the truth. I lied about my identity. I lied about my job. But I never lied about needing help. About Oliver needing someone genuine in his life. About you being—" His voice caught. "About you being exactly what we both needed." Helen appeared in the doorway, having clearly heard everything. "Grace, honey, why don't you take Oliver to the kitchen? Maria made fresh brownies. Give yourself some time to think." Grace nodded shakily, standing and taking Oliver's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you cleaned up." As they walked away, Oliver looked back at Adrian with red-rimmed eyes. "Dad, fix this, please." Adrian watched them disappear toward the kitchen, then sank onto the stairs, dropping his head into his hands. "That went well," Helen said dryly. "I've destroyed everything. Maybe." Helen sat beside him. "Or maybe you've just revealed the truth. What happens next depends on what you do with it." "What do I do?" Adrian looked at her desperately. "How do I fix this?" "You start by being honest. Really honest about everything. Your reasons, your fears, your feelings. No more games, no more tests, just truth. What if she still leaves?" "Then she leaves," Helen said gently. "But at least she'll leave knowing the real you, not the character you've been playing. And who knows? Maybe the real you is worth staying for." Adrian doubted that. The real him was a mess. A workaholic who'd hidden from grief behind spreadsheets and acquisitions. Who'd let his son drift for 2 years because facing Oliver's pain meant facing his own. Who'd orchestrated an elaborate deception because he was too afraid to be vulnerable. But Helen was right. If there was any chance of salvaging this, it started with truth. Complete, uncomfortable, unvarnished truth, even if it meant risking everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the estate gardens as Adrian stood outside the staff dining area, gathering courage he didn't know he possessed. Through the window he could see Grace sitting with Oliver at the small table. The boy's head rested on her shoulder while she gently stroked his hair, her own face still wet with tears. Maria had left them alone, giving them privacy. Helen had disappeared somewhere, likely giving everyone space to process. Thomas was deliberately staying busy with the grounds. The entire household seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Adrian knocked softly on the doorframe. Grace looked up, her eyes immediately hardening when she saw him. "Oliver, sweetheart," she said gently. "Why don't you go find Helen? I think she was looking for you. But go ahead, your dad and I need to talk, adult stuff." Oliver looked between them uncertainly, then slowly stood. As he passed Adrian, he paused. "Don't mess this up, Dad," he whispered. "Please." The weight of those words nearly crushed Adrian. He waited until Oliver was gone, then stepped into the room, keeping his distance from Grace. "Thank you for not leaving immediately," he said quietly. "I'm still leaving," Grace replied, but her voice lacked conviction. I needed to make sure Oliver was okay first. That boy has been through enough without watching another person walk away." "He has." Adrian pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, maintaining the space she clearly needed. And you're right. He doesn't deserve this. Neither do you. What I did was wrong, and I need you to know that I understand that. Do you? Grace's eyes flashed. Do you really understand what it feels like to have someone you trusted turn out to be a complete lie? To realize that every conversation, every moment you thought was real, was actually just part of some elaborate test? No, Adrian admitted. I don't. But I understand what it's like to be so terrified of being hurt again that you push everyone away. I understand what it's like to watch your child suffer and feel powerless to help. And I understand what it's like to finally find something real and then watch it slip through your fingers because of your own stupid choices. Grace's expression softened slightly, but she didn't speak. Adrian took a shaky breath and continued. After Catherine died, I became obsessed with protecting Oliver from being hurt again. But I didn't know how to do that while also giving him what he needed. Love, connection, a mother figure. Every woman I met in my world was either intimidated by the Beaumont name or attracted to it. They saw dollar signs, networking opportunities, social advancement. They saw Oliver as a package deal at best, an obstacle at worst. So you decided to lie to everyone instead? Grace challenged. I decided to remove the variable, Adrian said. The money, the name, the power, all of it. I wanted to see who would care about my son when there was nothing to gain from it. When kindness was just kindness, not an investment strategy. And you found me, Grace said bitterly. The grieving mother working as a maid, perfect candidate for your little experiment. I found someone extraordinary, Adrian corrected quietly. Someone who treated a lonely child with genuine love. Someone who asked for nothing and gave everything. Someone who made my son laugh for the first time in 2 years. His voice cracked. Someone who reminded me what it feels like to hope again. Grace looked away, wiping at her eyes. You still should have told me the truth. You're absolutely right, I should have, but Grace, I need you to understand something. Every day I spent here, every conversation we had, every moment with you and Oliver, that was real. My feelings, my gratitude, He stopped himself, suddenly uncertain how much to reveal. Your what? Grace asked, looking back at him. Adrian met her gaze. My feelings for you, those were real too. The words hung in the air between them. Grace's eyes widened. Daniel, Adrian, whatever your name is, don't complicate this more than it already is. My name is Adrian, he said. Adrian Beaumont, I'm 38 years old. I've been running my family's company since I was 25. I lost my wife 2 years ago in a car accident, and I've been lost ever since. I work too much because it's easier than feeling. I've failed my son in countless ways because I didn't know how to be both a father and a grieving husband. He paused. And 3 weeks ago I met a woman who showed me what real strength looks like, what real kindness looks like, what real love looks like. Stop, Grace whispered. Just stop. I can't, Adrian said. Because you asked for honesty, and this is it. Yes, I came here with a plan. Yes, I was testing people. But Grace, you weren't just someone who passed a test. You became someone I couldn't imagine my life without. Someone Oliver can't imagine his life without. Grace stood abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. You're a billionaire. I'm a housemaid. You live in penthouses and run corporations. I clean rooms and fold laundry. We exist in completely different worlds. We're both just people, Adrian said, standing but not approaching her. People who've lost someone we loved. People trying to figure out how to move forward. People who found something unexpected in each other. Something built on lies, Grace countered, but her voice was softer now. The foundation was flawed, Adrian acknowledged, but what we built on top of it, the friendship, the trust, the connection, that was real, and it still is, if you'll give me a chance to prove it. Grace turned to face him, her expression torn. How do I trust you again? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation, another test? Because I'm laying everything bare right now, Adrian said. No more disguises, no more games. I'm telling you exactly who I am, flaws and all. I'm a workaholic who doesn't know how to process grief. I'm a father who's terrified of failing his son. I'm a man who made a terrible choice because he was scared of being used again. And I'm someone who has fallen for a woman who deserves so much better than what I've given her. You've fallen for me? Grace's voice was barely audible. Adrian nodded slowly. I didn't plan it. I didn't expect it. But yes. Somewhere between watching you teach Oliver to build Lego castles and listening to you read stories with ridiculous voices and seeing the way you light up when you talk about your dreams, I fell. Completely. Tears were streaming down Grace's face now. This is too much. It's too complicated. There are too many obstacles. There are a million reasons why this shouldn't work. Adrian agreed. Different backgrounds, different social circles, my deception, the media scrutiny that will come if we... He stopped. But Grace, when I look at Oliver's face when he's with you, when I see him happy and healing and learning to trust again, none of those obstacles seem insurmountable. And when I'm with you, when we're talking or laughing or just existing in the same space, I feel like maybe I'm healing too. Grace shook her head, but Adrian could see her resolve crumbling. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need, what Oliver needs. You already are. Adrian interrupted gently. You already have been. From the very first day. You just didn't know it because I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth. There was a long silence. Grace stared at him, and Adrian could see the war raging behind her eyes. Hurt versus hope, anger versus affection, self-protection versus the pull of something deeper. Finally, she spoke. If, and I mean if, I even consider staying, things have to change. Complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more tests, no more hiding behind false identities. Agreed, Adrian said immediately. And I need time. Time to process this. Time to figure out what I actually feel versus what I thought I felt when you were Daniel Morrison. Whatever you need. And Oliver comes first, Grace continued, her voice stronger now. No matter what happens between us or doesn't happen, that boy's well-being is the priority. He's already been through too much. I won't let him be collateral damage in whatever this is. He's my priority too, Adrian promised. Always has been, even when I went about protecting him the wrong way. Grace wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. I'm still angry with you. What you did was manipulative and hurtful, and I don't know how long it'll take me to fully trust you again. I understand. But I can't. Her voice broke. I can't walk away from Oliver. Not when he's finally starting to heal. Not when he needs stability and love and someone who isn't going to abandon him. She looked at Adrian with red-rimmed eyes. So I'll stay, for him, but you and I, we're starting over. From the beginning, as strangers getting to know each other, the real versions of ourselves. Relief flooded through Adrian so powerfully, he had to grip the back of a chair to steady himself. Thank you, Grace, thank you. I promise I'll do better. I'll be better. You'd better be, Grace said, attempting a small smile through her tears. Because if you hurt that boy again, billionaire or not, you'll answer to me. Understood. Adrian managed a weak smile in return. For what it's worth, I think you're terrifying when you're protective. It's one of the things He caught himself. One of the things I admire most about you. Grace shook her head, but there was a hint of amusement in her expression now. Nice save. I'm trying. The door burst open, and Oliver rushed in, followed by a slightly exasperated-looking Helen. I couldn't keep him away any longer, Helen said apologetically. Oliver ran straight to Grace, throwing his arms around her waist. Are you staying? Please say you're staying. Grace knelt down, cupping his face in her hands. I'm staying, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Oliver burst into fresh tears, this time from relief, and hugged her so tightly Adrian worried he might hurt her. But Grace just held him close, rocking slightly and murmuring reassurances. Over Oliver's head, her eyes met Adrian's. There was still hurt there, still uncertainty, but there was also something else. A fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way through this mess to something real. That evening, after Oliver had finally been coaxed to bed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, Adrian found Grace in the library. She was curled up in one of the leather armchairs, staring into the fireplace. May I join you? He asked from the doorway. She looked up, considering, then nodded. Sure. Adrian sat in the chair across from her, the firelight casting dancing shadows across both their faces. For a long moment, neither spoke. I meant what I said earlier, Adrian finally ventured. About starting over, getting to know the real versions of each other. So did I, Grace replied, which means I should probably know some actual facts about Adrian Beaumont beyond what I can Google. Adrian winced. I hadn't thought about that. The internet isn't always accurate. Really? Because according to Wikipedia, you're worth approximately $4 billion. You've been named one of New York's most eligible bachelors 3 years running, and you once bought a Picasso at auction for $12 million. Grace raised an eyebrow. Any of that true? The net worth is approximately correct, Adrian admitted. The eligible bachelor thing is embarrassing but accurate. And yes, I bought the Picasso, but it was for Catherine. She loved his blue period work. Grace's expression softened. That's actually really sweet. She was easy to love, Adrian said quietly. Beautiful, brilliant, kind. She came from old money herself, so she understood the pressures of this world. But she never let it change her core. She volunteered at children's hospitals, read to kids in underserved schools, used her privilege to try to make a difference. He smiled sadly. Oliver has her eyes. Sometimes when he looks at me a certain way, I see her so clearly it hurts. What happened? Grace asked gently. If you don't mind me asking. Drunk driver, Adrian said, the words still bitter after 2 years. She was coming home from a charity event. The other driver ran a red light, hit her car on the driver's side. She died instantly. The drunk driver walked away with minor injuries. God, Adrian, I'm so sorry. The worst part was telling Oliver, Adrian continued, needing suddenly to say it all, to let it out. He was 5. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that mommy isn't coming home? That she'll never tuck him in again? Never make him pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, never kiss his scraped knees and make them better? Grace moved to sit on the arm of his chair, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. You can't explain it. You just hold them while they cry and hope it's enough. It wasn't enough, Adrian said, his voice breaking. Nothing I did was enough. He withdrew, stopped smiling, stopped being the bright, happy kid he'd been. And I didn't know how to reach him because I was drowning in my own grief. So I worked. I buried myself in the company, in acquisitions and expansions and anything that kept my mind busy enough that I didn't have to feel. And Oliver paid the price, Grace said softly, not accusingly, just stating fact. Yes, I hired the best nannies money could buy, enrolled him in the best schools, gave him every material thing he could want. But none of it mattered because what he needed was his father, and I was too broken to give him that. Adrian looked up at her. Until I came here. Until I watched you with him and saw what he'd been missing. What we'd both been missing. Grace was quiet for a moment, her hand still on his shoulder. Can I tell you about Lily? Please. She was perfect, Grace began, her voice thick with emotion. Not in the way parents usually say their kids are perfect. I mean, she was genuinely special. Bright, compassionate, curious about everything. She used to collect rocks because she was convinced each one had a story. And if she found the right one, it would tell her its secrets. Grace smiled through tears. She had this laugh, this full-body, completely uninhibited laugh that made everyone around her smile. And when she got sick, when the leukemia took her energy and her hair and eventually her light, she still tried to make us feel better. 6 years old, dying, and she was comforting us. And Adrian took her hand, squeezing gently. After she died, I couldn't function, Grace continued. My marriage fell apart. My ex-husband and I grieved differently, grew apart, became strangers. I lost my job because I couldn't stop crying when I looked at the kids in my class. I lost my home, my savings, everything. I moved up north to escape the memories, took the first job I could find, and tried to figure out how to live in a world where my daughter doesn't exist. She looked at Adrian. So when you think you failed Oliver, I understand that guilt. I understand feeling like you're not enough. You were more than enough for Lily, Adrian said firmly. And you're more than enough for Oliver. For both of us. Grace's eyes filled with fresh tears. How do we do this, Adrian? How do we build something when we're both so broken? Maybe that's exactly why we can do it, Adrian suggested. Because we understand each other's cracks. We know what loss feels like, what grief looks like, what it means to keep going even when part of you wants to give up. We don't need perfect. We just need real. Grace leaned down, resting her forehead against his. Real is terrifying. I know. But real is also the only thing worth having. They stayed like that for a long moment, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Two wounded people finding unexpected solace in shared pain and tentative hope. Finally, Grace pulled back. I should get some sleep, it's been a long day. Grace? Adrian called as she reached the door. She turned back. Thank you. For staying. For giving us another chance. Don't make me regret it, she said, but she was smiling slightly. I won't. I promise. After she left, Adrian sat alone in the library, staring into the dying fire. His phone buzzed, his assistant probably, with another crisis that needed his attention. But for the first time in 2 years, Adrian didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, he thought about Oliver sleeping peacefully upstairs, about Grace's hand on his shoulder, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, broken pieces could fit together to create something whole. Tomorrow he would deal with the fallout from Vivian's visit. with the media attention that was surely coming, with the 1,000 complications that arose when a billionaire fell for his housemaid. But tonight, for the first time since Catherine died, Adrian Beaumont let himself hope. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a promise as Adrian stood on the terrace, coffee in hand, watching the estate grounds come alive. 3 weeks had passed since Vivian's disastrous appearance, 3 weeks of carefully rebuilding trust, of honest conversations and small moments that felt monumental. Vivian had made good on her threat. The headlines had been brutal. Billionaire's secret life, Beaumont plays dress up with staff, elite's cruel social experiment. The tabloids had a field day, painting him as everything from delusional to predatory. His board had called an emergency meeting. Investors had demanded explanations. The business world had erupted in speculation about his mental fitness to lead. Adrian had faced it all head-on. He'd released a statement, carefully crafted but brutally honest, explaining that he'd taken time away to focus on his son's well-being, that he'd made mistakes in how he'd gone about it, but that his priorities remained clear. Oliver first, everything else second. The board hadn't been happy, but they couldn't argue with the numbers. Beaumont Industries was still profitable, still growing, still dominant in their sector, and Adrian had made it clear he was coming back, on his terms. "You're up early?" Grace's voice came from behind him. Adrian turned, his heart doing that stupid skip it had started doing whenever she appeared. She was in jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking nothing like a housemaid and everything like home. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." Grace joined him at the railing, maintaining the careful distance they'd preserved over the past weeks. They were rebuilding, rediscovering, learning each other without the lies between them. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, but it felt real in a way nothing had in years. "The board meeting is today, isn't it?" she asked. Adrian nodded. "In 3 hours. They want me back in Manhattan, back in the office full-time. Back to being Adrian Beaumont, CEO instead of..." He gestured at himself, at the estate, at everything they'd built here. "Instead of being Oliver's dad," Grace finished quietly. "I'm not going back to how it was before," Adrian said firmly. "I've already told them. I'll lead the company, but I'm setting boundaries. No more 18-hour days. No more choosing board meetings over my son's life. They can accept it or find a new CEO." Grace's eyes widened. "You'd really walk away from Beaumont Industries?" "In a heartbeat," Adrian said, and meant it. "I've spent 2 years hiding in that company, using work as an excuse to avoid life. I'm not doing that anymore. Oliver deserves better. I deserve better." He paused, looking at her directly. "We deserve better." The "we" hung in the air between them. They hadn't defined what they were becoming, but it was there, growing stronger each day. "Adrian, I know we're taking things slow," he interrupted gently. "I know you need time, and I respect that. But Grace, I need you to know. Whatever happens today, whatever the board says, whatever the media throws at us, I'm not walking away from this. From you and Oliver and what we're building here." Grace's eyes glistened. "The media has been vicious. They're calling me a gold digger, saying I seduced you while pretending to be humble, that this whole thing is some elaborate scheme." "Let them talk," Adrian said. "Anyone who actually knows you knows the truth. You're the least materialistic person I've ever met. You turned down the salary increase I offered 3 times. You're still living in the staff quarters even though I have 12 empty bedrooms. Because accepting those things would change the dynamic," Grace interrupted, "would make this about money and power and all the things I'm trying to avoid. I need to know that what's growing between us is real, not influenced by your wealth or my gratitude or Oliver's need for a mother figure." "It is real," Adrian insisted. "Grace, I've dated women who had their own fortunes, who needed nothing from me financially, and every single one of them left me feeling empty. But you make me want to be better. Not richer, not more powerful, just better. A better father, a better man, a better version of myself." Before Grace could respond, the terrace doors burst open and Oliver ran out, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Dad, Grace, come quick, you have to see this." They followed him inside to the media room where the morning news was playing. Adrian's stomach dropped, expecting more tabloid coverage, more attacks on Grace, more speculation about his fitness as a parent and a CEO. Instead, what they saw made him stop in his tracks. The news anchor was interviewing Dr. Patricia Chen, Oliver's former nanny and a child psychologist. But more surprisingly, standing beside her were Maria, Thomas, and Helen, his entire Riverside staff. The narrative being pushed about Mr. Beaumont is completely false, Dr. Chen was saying. I worked with Oliver for 18 months after his mother's death. That child was suffering, deeply, profoundly suffering. And yes, Mr. Beaumont made mistakes in those early months of grief. But the moment he realized his son needed more than he could provide while buried in work, he took radical action. What you're calling a cruel experiment was actually a desperate father trying to find genuine help for his child. And Miss Williams? The interviewer pressed. Some are suggesting she's taking advantage of a vulnerable family. That's ridiculous, Helen cut in, her usually reserved demeanor replaced with fierce protectiveness. Grace Williams is one of the most genuine people I've ever met. She didn't know who Mr. Beaumont was, didn't care about his money. She cared about a lonely little boy who needed kindness, and she gave it freely, asking for nothing in return. I've worked for wealthy families for 30 years, Maria added, her accent thick with emotion. I've seen the users, the manipulators, the people who pretend to care. Grace isn't one of them. She's the real deal. And what Mr. Beaumont did, yes, he lied about his identity, but he did it out of love for his son, out of fear of being used again. Is that perfect? No, but it's human. Thomas spoke next, his gruff voice surprisingly gentle. That boy was broken when he came here. Quiet, sad, lost. Now he laughs, he plays, he's a kid again. You want to blame someone for that? Go ahead. But you'd be blaming the wrong people. The camera cut back to Dr. Chen. I've been working with Oliver weekly since Mr. Beaumont returned to the estate. The transformation is remarkable. He's engaging in age-appropriate play, expressing emotions healthily, forming secure attachments. Whatever happened at Riverside, it worked. That child is healing, and anyone trying to destroy that for ratings or clicks should be ashamed. The interview ended, cutting to the anchors discussing the surprising defense of Adrian Beaumont. But Adrian wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the screen, overwhelmed. They didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, they did, Grace replied, tears streaming down her face. Because they're family, real family, the kind that shows up when it matters. Oliver hugged them both fiercely. See? Everyone knows Grace is good. Everyone knows you were just trying to help me, Dad. It's going to be okay. Adrian looked at his son, this brave, resilient, beautiful boy, and felt something crack open in his chest. All the fear, all the guilt, all the walls he'd built around his heart since Catherine's death, they crumbled under the weight of this moment. You're right, buddy, he managed. It is going to be okay. His phone rang. His assistant, Adrian, answered, expecting damage control. Instead, she sounded excited. Mr. Beaumont, have you seen the news? We're watching it now. Social media is exploding. The narrative is completely flipping. People are calling it romantic, defending your right to protect your son, praising Grace for her authenticity. And sir, the board just called. They saw the interview. They want to open the meeting with a statement of full support. Adrian sat down heavily. They what? They're backing you completely. Several members said seeing your staff, people who had nothing to gain, defend you so passionately was the character reference they needed. They're ready to support whatever work-life balance structure you propose. After he hung up, Adrian looked at Grace, who was wiping away tears while Oliver chattered excitedly about how everyone knows the truth now. Grace, Adrian said softly. She looked at him, and he saw everything he'd been afraid to hope for reflected in her eyes. I know we're taking this slow. I know we're rebuilding trust. But I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me. She nodded, her hand finding Oliver's shoulder. I love you, Adrian said simply. Not because you're good with Oliver, though you are. Not because you're kind or genuine or any of the other things that first drew me to you, though you're all of those things. I love you because when I'm with you I remember who I wanted to be before grief tried to destroy me. I love you because you see my failures and my flaws and you're still here. I love you because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you. Grace's tears were flowing freely now. Adrian, I'm not asking you to say it back, he continued. I'm not asking you for anything except the chance to keep proving that this is real, that we can build something lasting, something true, something worth all the complications and challenges. Because Grace, you are worth it. You are worth everything. The silence stretched between them, weighted with possibility. Then Grace spoke, her voice shaking but clear. I love you too. Oliver gasped with delight, looking between them with hope blazing in his young face. I didn't want to, Grace continued, laughing through tears. I tried not to. I told myself it was too complicated, too fast, too impossible. But Adrian, you're right, this is real. What we have, what we're building, it's messy and imperfect and sometimes terrifying. But it's real. And after everything I've lost, after all the fake and the false and the disappointing, real is what I need. Real is what I choose. Adrian closed the distance between them, cupping her face gently in his hands. Are you sure? Because once I kiss you, once we make this official, there's no going back to just friends or just employer and employee. The media will intensify. The scrutiny will be brutal. Every aspect of our lives will be examined. I'm sure, Grace whispered. I've already been through the worst thing that could happen to me. I lost my daughter. Nothing the media throws at us can hurt more than that. And if I've learned anything from grief, it's that life is too short to let fear keep you from love. Adrian kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promise. Oliver cheered, throwing his arms around both of them, and they stood there, the three of them, holding each other in the morning light, broken pieces finally finding a way to fit together. 6 months later, the Riverside Estates garden had been transformed. White chairs lined a grass aisle scattered with rose petals. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees despite the afternoon sun. Maria had outdone herself with the catering. Thomas had groomed every inch of the grounds to perfection. Helen had coordinated everything with military precision. Adrian stood under an arch of flowers, watching Grace walk toward him in a simple cream dress that took his breath away. Oliver walked beside her, proudly carrying the rings, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. It was a small ceremony, just their estate family, a few close friends, Dr. Chen, and Adrian's mother, who had flown in from Paris and immediately declared Grace exactly what this family needed. No press, no society pages, no billionaire spectacle, just real people, real love, real joy. When Grace reached him, Oliver stood between them, holding both their hands as the officiant spoke about families formed not by blood, but by choice, about love that heals and hope that rebuilds. I, Adrian Beaumont, take you, Grace Williams, to be my wife, Adrian said when the moment came. I promise to choose honesty over fear, vulnerability over protection, and love over everything else. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the father Oliver deserves, and the man I want to be. I promise to never hide behind wealth or work or any other excuse. I promise to show up fully every single day. Grace's voice was steady despite her tears. I, Grace Williams, take you, Adrian Beaumont, to be my husband. I promise to trust the future we're building, to believe in second chances, and to love you and Oliver with everything I have. I promise to be brave enough to accept happiness, strong enough to weather challenges, and open enough to let you see all of me, the broken parts and the healing ones. I promise to choose us every single day. When they kissed, Oliver cheered loudest of all. Finally! Now we're a real family. The reception was perfect in its simplicity. They danced on the terrace as the sun set, Oliver insisting on dancing with both of them at once. Maria's food was devoured. Helen cried, though she denied it. Thomas made a surprisingly touching toast about how some folks are just meant to find each other, even if they take the scenic route. As evening fell, and the fairy lights glowed brighter, Adrian found Grace standing alone by the garden's edge, looking out over the grounds. Hey, Mrs. Beaumont, he said softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Having second thoughts? Not even one, Grace replied, leaning back against him. I'm just grateful for all of it. The good, the bad, the complicated path that brought us here. Even the lies? Even those, Grace said, because they led to truth, to this, to us. Oliver ran up, breathless from dancing. Can we do the thing now, the surprise? Adrian and Grace exchanged smiles. Go ahead, buddy. Tell everyone. Oliver ran back to the party, clapping his hands for attention. Everyone, I have an announcement. When the guests quieted, he grinned proudly. We're opening a learning center. The Grace Williams Beaumont Center for kids who need extra help. Dad's paying for it, Grace is going to run it, and I'm going to volunteer there. We're going to help kids like me who are sad or lonely or just need someone to care. The applause was deafening. Grace buried her face in Adrian's chest, overwhelmed. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. Yes, I did, Adrian replied. You told me your dream that first week, remember? A place where every child felt seen and valued. You gave that to Oliver. Let me help you give it to others. I love you, Grace said, looking up at him with eyes that held no shadows, no doubts, just pure, uncomplicated love. I love you too, Adrian replied. Both of you. My family. Oliver bounded back over, inserting himself between them as usual. "Best day ever," he declared. Adrian looked at his son, thriving, happy, whole, and at his wife, strong, genuine, home, and felt a peace he'd thought he'd never find again. Catherine would have loved Grace, he realized, would have approved of how she loved Oliver, how she challenged Adrian, how she brought light back into their lives. And while the grief of losing Catherine would always be a part of him, it no longer defined him. He'd learned that love wasn't finite, that hearts could break and heal and expand to hold new people, new possibilities, new joy, that endings could lead to beginnings, that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. Like a billionaire finding everything he needed in a humble woman who asked for nothing and gave everything. Like a grieving mother learning to love again by opening her heart to a lonely child. Like broken pieces coming together to create something stronger, more beautiful, more real than anything that came before. As the party continued around them, the three of them stood together, a family built not on wealth or convenience or obligation, but on choice, on healing, on love that was honest and hard-won and absolutely perfectly real. And in that moment, standing under the stars at Riverside, Adrian Beaumont finally understood what Catherine had known all along, that the best things in life couldn't be bought, couldn't be tested, couldn't be controlled. They could only be found, cherished, and held on to with everything you had. And that was exactly what he intended to do. 1 year later, the Grace Williams Beaumont Learning Center opened its doors on a crisp autumn morning. The building, a renovated historic schoolhouse in Westchester, buzzed with excitement as children and parents arrived for the first day. Grace stood at the entrance, greeting each family personally, learning names, making connections. She wore her heart on her sleeve now, no longer afraid of attachment, no longer holding back for fear of loss. Oliver, now 9, helped younger kids find their classrooms, proudly showing them around his mom's school. He'd grown 3 inches, lost 2 front teeth, and gained a confidence that came from being deeply, securely loved. Adrian watched from the sidelines, having learned that sometimes the best support was simply showing up and letting Grace shine. He'd restructured Beaumont Industries, promoted key executives, and finally achieved the work-life balance he'd claimed was impossible. Turned out it was just a choice, and he was finally making the right ones. As the morning rush settled and classes began, Grace found him in the hallway. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For believing in this. For making it possible. For..." She paused, her hand moving to her stomach with a secret smile. "For giving me reasons to believe in the future again." Adrian's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Grace, are you..." 10 weeks, she confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Dr. Chen confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait until today to tell you, until the center opened, until everything came full circle." Adrian pulled her close, overwhelmed with joy and gratitude and love so fierce it almost hurt. "A baby, we're having a baby." "We are," Grace confirmed. "Oliver's going to be a big brother. Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready for anything," Adrian said, and meant it. "As long as I have you." Through the classroom window, they could see Oliver helping a shy little girl stack blocks, using the same patience and kindness Grace had shown him. The cycle of love continuing. The cycle of healing spreading outward. "I used to think I'd never be happy again," Grace said softly. "After Lily died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd just exist, but never really live. And now I know that happiness doesn't replace grief, it just makes room for it. I'll always love Lily. I'll always miss her. But I can honor her memory by loving others, by building something that would make her proud, by choosing life, even after loss." Adrian kissed her forehead. "She would be so proud of you, of everything you've become, everything you've built." "We've built," Grace corrected. "All of us. You, me, Oliver, even your Riverside family. We all built this together." And looking around at the center filled with hopeful children, at Oliver confidently helping others, at Grace glowing with new life and renewed purpose, Adrian knew she was right. Love wasn't something you found in one person, one moment, one perfect scenario. It was something you built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day, with honesty and vulnerability and the courage to try again even after everything fell apart. It was messy and complicated and sometimes started with lies that led to truth. But in the end, it was the only thing that mattered, the only thing worth building, the only thing that lasted.